So today I'm going to do a portrait sketch of Jamal on toned paper using graphite and white chalk. And so I have a piece of Hansen Mitant, and this is kind of like a light middle value. You can see it's significantly darker than white. This is a paper towel. And the advantage and the pleasure of working on toned paper is that I can work in both directions, i.e. towards lighter values compared to the paper and towards darker values. That opens up a lot of possibilities to building our opposition across the volume more quickly, honestly, just happening more quickly. The background, the value of the paper also functions as a background. And can immediately suggest, without doing anything, a feeling of an environment. So I enjoy working on the toned paper. It's a lot faster. It gives you a head start into the world of value, allowing you to more quickly achieve some approximate translation of what we're seeing. Obviously, it's still an interpretation of the values that I'm perceiving in nature. It's still much more compressed than what I experience in nature, but it does get you one step closer to recreating this value structure, and can kind of serve as a bridge towards oil painting. And with oil paints, we can get even closer to what we're actually experiencing, to the point of it feeling like a simulacra of our visual experience. But the goal here again is to create the feeling of sculptural volume, and I'm going to follow the same basic two-step process of working out a very accurate, specific block-in, linear block-in using lines, and then transition towards building my values, building the opposition of values across each form, employing the white chalk. So I've got my graphite. I'm going to start blocking in with an HB, and then later I'll use white chalk. This is General's white chalk. And I also have Cretacolor white chalk. This one's a little bit more oily. And then I also have the Dürer, Faber-Castell Dürer. It's just nice to try different ones. You know, they all have a different touch, and they're not all going to mix very well or layer very well, but sometimes you want sort of a drier, chalkier application, and sometimes you want to be able to really sharpen the white to a point and hatch very finely. So it's nice to have a variety, just like I have a variety of pencils from my HB to an H, and then softer ones like B, 2B, and different brands as well. I often get questions about what brand materials I use, and I remember, this was 10 years ago, but I remember when I was at the Florence Academy, I did the drawing year, the first year program there. I remember Dan Graves talking about the importance of investing in quality materials, because when you're learning, especially when you're learning, because when you're learning, you want the result of your work to be limited not by your materials, but by your lack of knowledge. The fact that you are developing your skills, that's what's going to impede the result. If you're using substandard materials, those are also going to get in the way and make the whole endeavor even more difficult. So I feel like do yourself a favor, invest in good materials within your budget, and you know that's not going to. There's no guarantee that you're going to achieve your goal faster, but at least they won't get in your way. So. And what I often advise people to do is just choose a brand and really get to know the characteristics of them. So I've been using the Staedtler leads for years. I really know exactly how they they apply, and then I also have been using the Blackwings for quite some time, and I really like those. So I use the Blackwing, all three, the like soft, medium, and hard. Anyway, so I'm going to start my blocking. Again, initially employing very optical two-dimensional strategies. So looking for tilts, looking for shapes, maybe taking some measurements, maybe taking some comparisons. These are all things that I can do without knowing anything about what I'm seeing. They're just information on the picture plane, trying to work out how I'm going to draw that information forwards, flatten it on the picture plane, and then transfer it over here. It's just like double meaning to draw. I'm like drawing it forward or drawing closer to him in my mind, taking all of that and getting it over here. For me, primarily the objective is just the kind of the meditative act of paying very, very close attention to something. Trying my best to enter the kind of flow state where I am doing something very difficult, but I've worked very hard to develop the skills to do it, and so I'm being challenged and I'm learning about what I'm seeing and translating it here. I'm trying to honor nature in a very specific way, and so the idea of like the pose in terms of what it is perhaps saying or suggesting. That's maybe secondary to me. As I'm saying it out loud, I really feel that that's true. Jamal could turn his head in any way and I would find something interesting, worthwhile to study or to learn about. I feel like I don't want him in the pose to serve some other purpose, I guess, I don't want to shoehorn him into like, I'm not saying that that's just my goal for something like this, which is really just a study. I'm really just studying him. I'm just trying to learn about him. And so obviously, if I were trying to telegraph an idea or a narrative, then the pose would be really, really important. And I want to carefully set that up and try lots of different things. Maybe do a series of like thumbnails. But this as an exercise and as an opportunity to just study nature in a very careful, slow way, the pose is less important to me. Obviously, like there needs to be some shadow and some light. Here we've got like kind of a three-quarter. It looks like sort of 3/4 light and 1/4 shadow, and I think that'll work. It'll work well. I do think about the light. Obviously, there's a little bit of fill light on his neck. And so it's not a perfectly controlled environment with just one light source. But that's interesting. It illuminates the musculature on his neck and prevents it from just being this like dead zone of darkness. But I can squint and return to that posterized version, that simplified version that reminds me that there's a lot of possibilities for how I'm going to interpret these values. I can really simplify that larger dark shape. And that's kind of what's exciting about drawing and about painting, is that I see there's all this information and I've just got an infinite number of possibilities for how I'm going to interpret it with these materials in however long I have. A lot of possible outcomes. I'm really noticing this tilt across his shoulders. I feel like it's such a naturalistic way of sitting. It's like sort of slouching down a little bit. And it's quite a strong tilt from deltoid to deltoid. If I study that on the picture plane and then compare it across, I feel like I could get even more. This shoulder dropping down. And that's a little moment that I would like to embrace, because it adds a little bit more texture to this view of just a person sitting, looking over my left shoulder or to my left. Now, it's not necessarily going to persist, after the break. I sort of don't not gonna, I sort of like just seeing if he sits that way again. Obviously, if it were important to me, rather than just something I'm like, that's cool, like put that in, then I'd ask him to do that. But in this moment, it's like, I like that, I'm gonna put that in. Who knows, in 3 hours, it might be completely reversed. And that's fun too. I mean, fun's not the right word for it, but it may not be fun. And again, like, I could just arrange it to be that way every time. But there's something about the flow of responding to all these possibilities in the moment, in 3 hours, if it's completely reversed. I don't know, I'm presented then with a choice. I can ignore the new position, I can respond to it, change my drawing, or I can keep the choice that I've made at this moment now. So it's been a couple of poses. I feel pretty good about the block-in. Again, I always say that it's done when I'm ready to move on. When I say I'm ready, I'm not going to necessarily get feedback from the drawing that gives me permission to move on. I have to give myself permission to move on to the next step and consider how much time I have and what level of finish I want it to have. I feel the few things that may improve in the next few poses are going to happen when I've landed on that form and I'm paying even closer attention to it, to its particularity. So I've given everything a medium tone. Is it dark? It's very relative, right? I think it's, now that I'm about to really start sculpting in graphite and white chalk, the volumes, I have to make a decision about what the overall range of the drawing is going to be. And it can be helpful to remind myself of what the possibilities are with this material on this paper. So the paper has some value, the graphite right now has some value, and the white chalk has some value. And between the three of these, I will make a choice that will create the illusion of dimensionality. What I really like to do is embrace the fact that working on toned paper allows me to create that sense of value much more quickly in an abbreviated way by allowing the value of the paper to stand in for multiple values on the volume. And to discover what values it's going to represent, I need to do maybe some tests. And I could do that over here. I could perhaps make a little, like a legend, kind of, like on a map. So if this ovoid represents the skull, then the shadow is something like this with my light source up here. If I fill in my shadow, immediately these values look lighter. But I can make these values look darker by applying some white chalk. Depending on the amount of time you have, I might even just use the white chalk in the areas of specular reflection or highlight, which are not going to be here, but somewhere inside the contour. I want to remember that the specular reflection doesn't occur on the plane that is most facing the light source, but rather on a plane perfectly situated between the plane that is most facing the light source, which is this one, and the plane that is most oriented towards me as the viewer of the object. a specular reflection is going to occur between these two planes, because this is the plane on the object that is going to function as a mirror, reflecting the light source into my eye. And of course, if I were to move, then the specular reflection would move with me. But it's always going to be between the plane that is facing me directly and the plane that is facing the light source directly. So we can see how, even though this paper doesn't look very dark, the white chalk we can really push up to a brighter value there. And just with the white chalk and the paper, I've got quite a lot of range here. This makes me realize that I don't necessarily need a ton of graphite. To turn from the paper or from the white chalk. I'm going to return to the features and see if I can't sort of tighten the focus a little bit in certain areas by looking for an opportunity for maybe like a dark accent or refining an edge or turning it a little bit more. Just then I saw an opportunity for a little accent here, and I'm thinking about how this area that I'm looking at, it's it's not just his dark lip. We've got his lip that's receiving light up here. Obviously a pretty dramatic local color difference between this yellow-red to this more purpley neutral. And then turning into a shadow, a terminator here around the very round cylindrical volume of the lip. And then just below that, with his lips closed and the light source above, we actually have a cast shadow. The cast shadow of the upper lip casting on the lower lip. So maybe that's what that dark accent can represent, the cast shadow. Here, this area might be another opportunity for a bit of a lost edge, where we have the turning around the jaw away from the light source. Thinking about this as a plane facing down, plus the locally dark stubble of the beard, silhouetted by the locally dark hair. Although here the hair is illuminated by the light, it's not as dark as it is over here, and so maybe there's a kind of almost the same value there. And I can let go of my very cut out contour. And that can be a moment of passage. That's probably just like a painting term, actually, but a bleeding together, a melding together here. Conversely, up here, there's an enormous amount of contrast between the brilliantly illuminated cheekbone and the hair beyond. So we've got this little conversation happening. So I've recently been organizing my thoughts about learning around this paradigm that I was introduced to on a podcast. This doctor was describing his process of learning to swim as an adult. Yeah. And it, in a very pithy but powerful way, it describes this movement through states of consciousness as you're acquiring a new skill. And there are 4 states. And so the first state is unconscious incompetence. When you're unconsciously incompetent of something. So if I just imagined playing the violin, I'm not even conscious of what I don't know about it. I know what a violin is, and I can imagine someone playing it. But I'm not aware yet of all the things that I would need to learn. The second state is conscious incompetence, like being conscious of the things that you would need to learn. And I think that you'll move to that state very quickly. If someone handed me a violin, I would immediately become conscious of like the fact that I don't know how to hold it, and I don't know like what the strings signify, etc. And then the longest journey, I think, is after that, from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. And for any real technical skill, I think we were talking about this earlier, it really benefits to have an experienced teacher guide you along that. You don't need a teacher, but it certainly helps, and you'll move a lot faster towards being in control of that skill, internalizing the strategies, the methods, the ideas that help you perform that task successfully. And then the final state, like the ultimate state, brings you back to the unconscious. It's a state where you're unconsciously competent. And this is when the music is writing itself. This is like the creative flow state, when things are just happening. You don't have to think about it. And I feel like I really like that, because I've observed that, and I can think about my own process, my own evolution as an artist who really actively sought after skills. Moving through those states and still being in those states, and as I try new things, going back into the earlier states, and observing other artists, my mentors, and thinking, oh, how do they do it? It just seems so easy. Like they're just grabbing the colors that they need. It doesn't seem like they're thinking about it. They've achieved a certain degree of unconscious competence in what they're doing that opens up space for them to contemplate other aspects of their experience making the thing, and other aspects of the work as the picture, or whatever the form is, as an artwork that expresses some deeper meaning, perhaps. But I think just arriving at that state of unconscious competence takes a long time and requires a lot of patience. It doesn't happen overnight, and there aren't really any shortcuts. There's only thoughtful practice and cultivation of a kind of curiosity about what you're doing, so that you can stay open to learning as much as you can, and synthesizing it in your own special way, and remembering that you're on your own unique journey. No one can teach you how to be an artist. They can teach you how to draw, but you already are an artist.